Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to share May 2025 clubs from Spellbinders. This is part 2. I've already done a part 1. We have a ton of fantastic clubs. That first die that I showed there was the die of the month called Classroom Chronicles. This is the Glimmer of the month called Scribbled a Note. Then we have the Better Press of the month from A to Z, and the clear stamp of the month called Crayon Creations. And not only do I have the clear stamp here, but I also have the coordinating die to cut out all of those sentiments as well as those adorable crayons. Then we have our embossing folder of the month called Abstract Study. And then the 3D embossing folder of the month. And this one I'm going to be using in this video. I love this one. It's called Stacked Stories. I absolutely love all the detail on each one of those. Then we have our stencil of the month called Write On, and our stitching die of the month called Stitched Study Nook. This one is such a fun one, and I'm playing with that one in this video. I can't wait to share with you what I did. And then we have the large die of the month called Spell It Out Fridge. This here is the caboodle item of the month. It's called Yay Crayon. So you can see with what we have here that we have almost an education school theme. This here is not one of the clubs. It's a coordinating die that will go with that Spell It Out Fridge. It's called Spell It Out Fridge Staples. So this is perfect for adding different things on the inside of the fridge. And I'm going to be using both of those today. So these are what I'm going to be concentrating on today. The 3D embossing folder of the month, the stitching die of the month, as well as the stencil of the month and the large die of the month. So I'm using the 3D embossing folder first, and I'm going to create a very, very simple but pretty and elegant card. I have some Indigo Cardstock here. It's a quarter sheet, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I'm embossing it with that 3D embossing folder, and look at all of that gorgeous detail there. So I am taking this background and I'm taking Lisa Horton Crafts bronze metallic pad, and I'm just lightly rubbing it over the surface. This is just going to highlight those raised edges. Now, full disclosure, some of those recessed edges get little striations of that color as well, but I did that on purpose because this embossing folder kind of reminded me of those old like encyclopedia books with that beautiful metallic detail on there, and that's kind of what I was trying to go for. So I trimmed that down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I have a piece of Hammermill Cardstock here that I trimmed to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 inches. And I'm taking that bronze pad and just putting it on the outside edges of that cardstock. So this is going to create a mat to go around our embossed piece. And this is a perfect solution if you're using a unique ink or something that is going to be really hard to coordinate or to match a cardstock with for doing a mat. As well as that bronze pad, I'm using the solid hot foiled sentiment that I created in my part 1 video. I'm using the happy birthday one. This pewter or satin pewter foil looks really pretty with that bronze ink. It's not an exact match, but it coordinates nicely, and I thought that solid hot foiled sentiment looked nice on the front of this card. Now, I think this would be a fun card to create to give a gift card for a book lover, with all of those spines of the books on the back there, and I have the happy birthday sentiment on the front. I think it would be a great thing to send to a book lover. One of my daughters has been getting into reading a lot lately and has been loving it. This would be a perfect thing to send to her with a gift card for a bookstore inside. Perfect for any book lover really. And I think you can have fun with a lot of different techniques with this folder, or you can keep it really, really simple like mine. Like I said, it made me think of those old books with the gold foil or the metallic foil on there. So with that card done, I want to start playing around with that stitching die of the month. This is the Stitch Study Nook. Now, because we have such a beautiful combination of different things for a study nook, I thought it would be fun to make this lamp light up. So I'm using a 1-light, I have a 5-pack here. So this just has a single light to it. It comes with batteries that pop right in, and then there's a button that you press to make that light go on. Now, if that wasn't enough texture or enough difference, uniqueness for this card, I'm also using some velvet cardstock. This is stuff that I use somewhat regularly. I just love it for different things to create different textures, and I thought it would work well for not only the cat, but the chair as well as the lampshade. Now, I just popped in to show the DIY deck card that inspired my color palette here. I'm using the same color palette as I used for my part 1 video, and I talk about that a little bit more in my part 1 video, how I chose this particular color palette. And these particular velvet cardstocks work really, really well with that color palette, as well as with the theme for this particular card. Now, anytime I'm using that velvet cardstock, it does have adhesive on the back of it, but to give it a little bit more sturdiness, I typically will take some scraps of cardstock, put it behind the velvet before I die cut it. You can die cut it without that and just use it as an adhesive velvet sticker if you want, but often I have different pieces that I'm gluing together. So by adding that cardstock to the back before die cutting, it just adds a little bit of stability and makes it a little bit easier to glue those pieces together. The rest of the pieces for my plant were really, really easy to layer together, and I have those set aside. Now, when it comes to the stitching, I have the stitching part of my chair here die cut out of the velvet cardstock as well as the lamp. But then I also take the outline dies and I cut some solid cardstock as well. Once I have them stitched, what I like to do is take a solid die cut or solid cardstock die cut piece and glue it to the back. It gives it a little bit of stability. It puts or seals in the ends of my thread, even though I use a little bit of Best Ever craft tape to seal in those ends as well. But it also makes it much easier to glue my card together because I have cardstock on the back of that piece, and I can glue from cardstock to cardstock when I'm assembling my card. It also gives it just a little bit of extra dimension. So for this particular card, I just really like that extra dimension. I'm using some gold floss to do my details here. I thought it coordinated nicely with the metallic pad from my previous card, as well as the fact that I just really liked the idea of the gold accents on both the lamp as well as the chair. But you could easily, if you wanted, you could choose a coordinating floss or a color that was a little bit closer to the actual die cut that you use. The nice thing about these stitched dies is you can pick and choose. If you want the stitching to be very noticeable, you can use a contrasting color or a metallic floss, or you can do it so it's a little bit more coordinated, a little bit closer in color tone. The nice thing too about these stitching dies is when you die cut them, there are little impressions that get die cut with it that show you exactly where they intend for you to stitch that floss. So there's very little guesswork to it. It makes it very easy to do that stitching because you can just follow the pattern that is already on the die cut that you've created because you can see those lines there. You could also be really creative and come up with different stitching as well if you wanted. So you have a lot of flexibility there. So I did the rest of my chair off screen because it's all repetitive, it's very repetitive, and I glued my solid die cut to it. Now, when I'm gluing those solid die cuts to it, I have some sewing clips that I like to use to hold those two pieces together. Because of that floss, sometimes there's a little bit of extra dimension there and it doesn't really want to stay. But so by putting those sewing clips there, letting them dry completely, it just frees up my hands to work on other things and I'm not sitting there holding two pieces of cardstock. The bottom of the chair as well as the lace and the hanging cord from the lamp are very, very easy to add. And because I'm gluing on velvet cardstock, I do let it dry just a little bit longer because of the dimension and the softness and the fuzziness of that velvet. So I do let that dry a little bit longer before I start to assemble my card. Now, while that is drying, I'm going to stencil my background, and I just thought this would be a fun way to kind of have a patterned background, a little bit of a wallpaper background without being too bold and taking away from that lamp as well as that chair. So I took some tea dye distress ink. I'm using a large Spellbinders ink blending brush. I put it over my quarter sheet of cardstock, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch inches and did one full stenciling of it. And then I shifted that stencil and I did not re-ink my brush. I just used whatever ink was left on the edge of on that brush to stencil it a second time to get a little bit more of an interesting pattern. Now that I have my background done here, I want to create my light for my lamp. So I already have that battery in the one light piece. I do need to punch a hole to create an opening for that light to shine through. So I took my die cut for that lamp, put a little pencil mark where I thought that light should go, and then I'm using my crocodile tool in order to punch that light or punch that hole. Now the crocodile tool has two different hole sizes. I'm using the larger one here. You could easily use a hole punch. The only thing is you need to make sure that wherever you're putting this hole, you're able to go in enough with whatever punch you're using. So I used my crocodile and then I used a different punch, but you could see I left marks on the side of that piece there. So off screen, I re-stenciled that background and redid it because I did not like those marks on the side there, and just used my crocodile tool to create that background and to create that hole. Another option, you could use a circle die as well if you have one that's small enough for the hole that you're wanting to create. And then a third option, because you're not actually going to see this hole, you could easily just use an X-Acto knife and just cut an opening. Because this is going to be covered with that die cut, it's not going to be visible, so it doesn't need to necessarily look pretty. To glue or to adhere that one light to the background of my stencil background here, I chose some Suquang tape. I have some 1/4 inch Suquang tape here. It's just a really nice, strong, double-sided tape, and I wanted to make sure that that light was going to stay in place and not move. In order to mark where that button is to turn that light on, I just took that crocodile with that same larger punch, and I punched some poppy cardstock. It just makes a red dot where that piece is. And if by chance someone doesn't realize that you press on that, because it's really easy to not necessarily know that, you could easily just put a little post-it on the inside and say, press the red dot on the front of the card, or you could tell someone. Now, because my one light has a little bit of dimension to it, I do want to put some foam tape on the back here just to make sure that I don't have a bubble or a bow on the front of my card. It's going to give that front a little bit of extra dimension, but it's going to also give the space for that pack there. I was originally going to use some foam strips, but when I started putting it down, it was a little bit thinner than I wanted it to be, and I didn't think it was going to be thick enough to not have a little bit of a bubble or curve in the front of my card. So I just chose to use some of the excess foam from my foam pop dots. I always like to use this up anyways. It's perfect to use for backgrounds like this because you tend to use a fair amount of it. It would take a lot of foam pop dots to get the same coverage. This is going to offer up a lot of support. So my stenciled background here, I had it trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I also have a piece of Celestial cardstock that is trimmed to 4 1/8 inches by 5 3/8 inches. And because I have the foam pop dots on there, it is a little bit more difficult to be able to get a nice even amount around my stencil piece to get that nice even mat. So you can see that I lifted it up, but I lifted it up before I had pressed everything down securely, so it was fairly easy to lift right back up. Then I'm taking my Barely Art glue and gluing my chair in place. But what I wanted to change was that light where I had it placed, I had it glued down flat on my stencil background. And as I was assembling my card, I thought if I put some foam pop dots behind there, it adds a little bit of dimension to that lamp, but it also gives an opening for that light to shine through a little bit better. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing these lights, is you do want to make sure that you can actually see the light really, really well. So I added some foam pop dots on the back of the lamp, put a little bit of that Barely Art glue on the little hangy cord there, so it hangs or it glues flat to the card base. But you can definitely see that light a lot better. And I love the final result of this. I love the texture of that velvet from that cardstock as well, or the velvet cardstock, as well as the fun little light. It's just fun to add something a little bit different. For my third card, I'm using that Spell It Out Fridge large die of the month. I have a bunch of this already die cut, ready to go, and I want to use that fridge die to create a shaped card with it. Because that card, or because that die piece is so large, it's about the size of a 4¼ by 5½ inch card. It's just a fun way to create a unique shaped card base. So not only do I have pieces from the fridge die set die cut, and I'm assembling them so that I can start assembling my card. I have some pieces for the front of the card, but I also have some from that Spell It Out Fridge Staples die set to put things on the inside of the fridge. Now, originally I thought about putting one of those one lights for the fridge when you open it up, but I also thought it was kind of weird that, like, you know how when you open a fridge and the light automatically goes on, if there was something like that, and there might be, I just might not have heard about it, I thought that would be a fun addition to open up the card and have a light turn on. Again, if there's something like that, I haven't heard about it yet, but I thought that would be a fun thing and something you could do with these one lights if you wanted to be able to press a button for that light to come on. I think that would be a fun thing to do. I ended up opting not to do that with this card because it wasn't exactly how I had envisioned it or how I wanted it to go. So I just decided to put the things on the inside of the card and have it just as a more kind of interactive card that had some die cuts on the front and die cuts on the inside of the fridge. Now, these are really, really easy die cuts to assemble, just like most of the Spellbinders die cuts. Again, I'm gluing them together with that Barely Art glue and putting them underneath my large acrylic block so that it holds everything in place while I'm gluing other pieces together. I do this often because it just frees up my hands to be working on other things. I always hate to be standing there waiting for something or waiting for glue to start holding. So with all of my extra pieces there ready to go, I realized I hadn't actually glued on the plant for my last card. So I just pulled that back in and put that plant on there. And that actually completes the card there. And I just love that light. I can't stop playing with the light. So with that second card finally already done, I'm ready to die cut my card base. So for the front of my fridge, I wanted it to be the Celestial Cardstock color. So I have a piece, a quarter sheet, so 4¼ by 5½ inches of Celestial Cardstock. I placed that on the die and I did tape it in place with some Best Ever Craft tape to make sure that it wasn't going to move on me. Another option here would have been to have a piece of cardstock that was slightly bigger to include that tab and then score along the tab, fold it. So then I would have a card base that kind of had 3 flaps to it. So you could open the front of the fridge and then have nothing on the inside of the card. I opted to just use that same die set to cut a card base. And then I'm going to glue the different color on the front of the fridge. This way I have white on the inside of my fridge and blue on the outside. You could always do the Celestial Cardstock or whatever cardstock color you choose to do your fridge, have it the same color for both the inside and the outside. So you really have a lot of choice when it comes to this and how you want it to look. So with my card base done, and you can see that I also used that Best Ever Craft tape to tape that card base in place before die cutting it. When I positioned it, I made sure that the fold was just inside the top part of the die for the fridge so that it didn't die cut that. And so that the fold for the side of my card or the side of my fridge goes all the way to the top aside from that top little curve there. So I glued my blue piece onto the front, and then I'm just going to add the little die cuts that I have for the front of the card. Now, one thing that I love about this fridge die set is there's a small full alphabet die set, so you can create little alphabet letters for the front of your card. And when I was thinking about this card, I was thinking that I couldn't really think of an occasion where I would want to give someone a fridge card, but I did think it would be fun if you wanted to give someone, say, a grocery gift card or something like that. I thought this would be a fun way to give that to someone. Can't really think of another occasion, but I do think that would be a fun way to give a grocery gift card to someone. And really, it could just be my brain stuck on it. If you have other ideas that would be fun for a card like this, I'd love to hear them. Put them down in the comments below. So for the tiny little letters, I do like to use some reverse tweezers to hold those letters while I put the glue on there. It just makes sure that my hands are not in the way and I don't get glue all over them. And then I can position each one of those letters exactly where they're supposed to go. Now, I chose to just die cut those letters out of red, but I also think it would be really fun to do multiple colors, just like the alphabet letters that well, I grew up with them and my kids grew up with them, are in a bunch of bright colors. I think it would be fun to have some bright colors for those as well. So once I had glued these little notes with the little magnets on top, and there's more options in that die set than what I'm using. I just chose ones, I wanted to keep it fairly simple. I wanted to have more of the detail on the inside of the card. I realized I had forgot to glue on the handles of the fridge. So I sloppily put those on the front of the card, dropping things and changing my mind while I was going. And then I realized that it would be really cool to have the wax seal on the month on there as more of like a fridge magnet. However, had I thought about this ahead of time and I didn't, I either would have chosen a different color for my fridge with that color of wax seal, or I would have opted to do that wax seal in a different color. I think it would have looked really great on the blue as a red wax seal, or even like a silver wax seal, just something a different color. The blue on blue kind of, even though you get the texture from that wax seal, it kind of hides it a little bit. Or do say a red fridge with those, with the blue wax seal on it. I think you'd be able to see it a little bit better. Even a white wax seal I think would be fantastic. So with the front of my card done, I'm ready to put stuff on the inside of the card. So when I glued my shelves down, I only put glue on the bottom of them so that I could easily tuck things inside the shelf. And then I finished that card off with one of the gift card pockets. These are so easy to use. They have an adhesive background or backing on them. You just peel off that backing and put it right into or inside the card. And it's a great way to add a gift card pocket really easy to the inside of the card. So that way you know that it's nice and secure in there. Then we have the book nook with that light, which I absolutely adore. And our first card, which was super easy to create with that indigo cardstock and the bronze ink highlighting all of those beautiful details. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time that you spend with me. I hope you have a fantastic day.